And good evening and welcome back at it here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, Soren Petro with you as we take you through all things Kansas City Chiefs, proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Tonight, we cover the fact that the Chiefs did not franchise tag Orlando Brown. How hurt is Eric Eager that his prediction was wrong? Stay tuned. We're going to find out. Frank Clark's not going to be a Chief, or is he? Brett Veach left the combine last year thinking that he was going to get a deal done with Tyreek Hill. He didn't. It's the same thing going to happen with Chris Jones. In this situation this year, the Chiefs got killed in an NFLPA survey. That's right, 29th, according to the Players Association, the Chiefs organization ranks. JuJu Smith-Schuster can't stay off social media and can't stop sparring with A.J. Brown. Why? And does that have anything to do with what's going on with the Kansas City Chiefs? We break it all down right now on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You're listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro was the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Gann Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GannAsphalt.com for more info. Now, here are the hosts of the best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
You know, what's amazing to me is that we get ready to do this, and we're chatting in the chat room, and Eric is chastising me for not complimenting him on. Go ahead, say it. What do you love, Eric?
Touchdown, Kansas City.
Yeah, with the
good. It's a great sponsor, by the way. I love Gann.
I will tell you something about them here in a second. I love that. However, you wanted a change to the open, and I made that change happen, and you have not acknowledged it in any way, shape, or form.
It's great. Although I
noticed that.
Look, I'm trying to make Curtis some money. I did change my title slightly at Sumer, so he'll have to go back, and you'll have to pay him a little bit more, like maybe like a pizza or something to change it up a little bit. But no, I mean, look. The great sponsor, great podcast, and I love the fact you snuck in there the truth that we are the best Chiefs podcast.
That's the change that he wanted, Jeff.
That was the change. I did notice that as it came through Curtis's deep booming voice.
So I go
voice
out.
Of God.
I make it exactly what Eric wants, and I get nothing, yet he's going to chastise me right before we come on the air because I don't acknowledge his Kansas City all the time. By the way, thanks to our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, doing wonderful work around Kansas City. If you need anything done with the parking lot, give them a call, because I can tell you, shout out to our friends. Hang on, I want to make sure I say the hospital correctly. To the Cass County Regional Hospital in Harrisonville. They're big fans of the podcast, and they had Gann out doing some work for them. So full service paving and pavement contractor. That's what they do at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, make parking lot problems disappear. Since 1994, they've been doing it. And as you heard Curtis say, they are hiring up to $30 per hour, hiring for all positions, paid time off, just some of the benefits. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. But how about it? Shout outs from the customers.
They make they make asphalt problems disappear the same way Patrick Mahomes makes quarterbacks like Derek Carr disappear from the AFC West. Goodbye. Have fun in New Orleans, by the way, Mr. Carr.
Or even we can transition and say the way Patrick Mahomes makes the need to have top end left tackles around, right? Is that where we begin today? No franchise tag, Jeff, on Orlando Brown. I think all three of us said we wouldn't put the tag on him, but they will. We're all three, I guess, right and then wrong. Is that how we describe this one? Or is your reaction to Orlando Brown not getting the tag?
There's the smart play. I think we all agree that they shouldn't do it because of the cost involved and because of the way last offseason went. And look, I think there's no surprise here that he's going to be looking for a very high payday in the very near future. I mean, he can read. He's a smart guy. His name has been thrown around in a lot of free agent rankings, top 10 overall, top offensive lineman available. And I think the Chiefs have been around him long enough to know what he is, to know what he brings, and to also know if you're paying that kind of price for a left tackle, the kind of price he wants to be paid, you want Trent Williams walking in through the door. You want Jonathan Ogden walking through the door. You want Tony Baselli. You don't want a player that you have to protect, that you have to help out from time to time to protect your quarterback. And so I think we've seen the last of Orlando Brown. I don't see where they're going to cut some kind of deal and they will end up not competing with somebody else. He has what he wanted. He's got a ring. He's got the opportunity to go into free agency and look for the best possible deal. The market is down for guys at his position. I think he's going to be playing someplace else come this fall.
Yeah. Eric, besides the comments about the moosing job you did on your hair today, which always seems to be a strong topic amongst the listeners here. If you're catching us via the podcast, we do stream live. In the offseason, I think we're going to be double dipping our two podcasts. We also have our sister podcast, Too Deep, our NFL podcast, which we'll do a little bit later on tonight here on a Tuesday. We'll see if Eric's hair can hold up for two podcasts tonight. But what's your reaction to one Orlando Brown not getting the tag?
Yeah, look, as somebody who has used help, to keep my hair up for this entire season, I know what the Chiefs feel like at left tackle. Orlando Brown sort of not being able to stand on his own 2 feet at times. No, I mean, look, I think all of us thought that they would tag Orlando Brown because we sort of thought that the Chiefs would go part of the way there, but not all the way there, right? I think all of us were like, look, they're not going to trade for DeAndre Hopkins. That's ridiculous. They're not going to do any of these things. Being a cap healthy team is sort of the same thing as being a healthy person. You can't just have a 1 week juice fast and say you're healthy, right? But the
or take a couple of pills for your hair and say it's all fixed, right?
I don't know. Does it look okay?
It's getting good.
But this move was, I think, what we've wanted from the Chiefs for a long time, right? Like this idea of like acknowledging the truth, embracing the unknown, because you have the best head coach and the best quarterback in the game, and you have a defense that is much improved, a coordinator who's now won 2 Super Bowls with you. I'm very happy as a fan of the team that they're going down this route. Now they have some questions to answer now. How they're going to sort of work with it. Are they going to stay with the guys on the roster like Niang and Prince? And what do they do at right tackle is another really good question. But I was wrong because I didn't believe enough in the Chiefs that they would do this.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's probably the most striking is how analytical they're becoming, right? Like, because I think old school football mindset is what we got. What are they going to do at left tackle right now? Does anybody think they know themselves 100% for sure who's going to be playing left tackle, barring injury, right? Anybody could get hurt in training camp and change it. But barring injury, does anybody think that the Kansas City Chiefs know who their left tackle for sure, who their left tackle is going to be? Well, the answer is no, right? And so that speaks to them making a decision purely based upon value. purely based upon what is the right thing to do, and purely based on their own confidence in themselves to be able to figure it out between now and then, to understand that even though we don't have the answer right now, we're going to make the right decision for this football team for the long haul.
It's not unlike last year when they let Charvarius Ward go. And, right? And when they let Ward go, who were their outside corners at the time? Right? And I know it's a little different because Ward's wasn't as expensive, but that was a 4-year starter for them who cost $14 million on the open market, and they let him go without an answer of who was going to replace him, right? Like, that answer came in the draft and, multiple times. And I think that was, that's similar to what's going on now. And to your point, I think that they're saying, they're believing enough in their scheme, and they're believing enough in the law of large numbers with the draft that they're willing to do this.
Yeah, I think that if they don't win the championship this past year with a lot of young players playing and contributing at a high level, they don't do this. And a couple of years ago, they don't make this move because there was such a concern that they were not going to have an opportunity to maximize the opportunity to win another championship with Mahomes on a rookie deal. And so there was a lot more urgency and probably insecurity about that position, left tackle. And so I thought when they were chasing Trent Williams and throwing the money, I said it 2 years ago. I said, it's okay to go draft a guy and develop him at that position. You'll be fine. Your quarterback's great. Your head coach is great. You have a good supporting cast. You'll figure it out. And I don't think they had the patience to wait for that now. Now you got 2 rings. Now you've got a rookie class that's played at a high level. And you know that it's just not worth playing that game of we got to go out here and pay big money to have somebody at that spot to protect Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes has grown every year. The growth he showed this year in being able to take less than stellar options at receiver and make them better, the decision-making, the ball coming out faster, playing within the offense, I think all those things make it easier to make this kind of move. I mean, even if I'm just throwing out names here, and I don't think it'll be these guys, but a Donovan Smith or a Taylor Lewan, if it's someone like that, an older veteran towards the end of his career or a salary cap casualty, that's a much better option on the cheap than it is to pay an overpriced left tackle who's going to cost you someone else on the roster down the road.
Yeah, and I think we had the comment. Said, there's no way that they could. Where was it here? Somebody had it. They have a plan. That there's no way that they would leave. I'm sorry, I'm struggling to go back and find where it was. Here it is. This is it right here. Rhett said they have a plan, or they would have tagged him. No plan to not protect the blind side of the not having a plan to protect the blind side of the quarterbacks, or to protect the franchise. You can't see that happening. Yes, there's a plan, but where it leads them to is not there. Right. I don't think it's Taylor Lewin. Brett's talking about that. I mean, he hasn't been healthy for 3 years. If it is, that's like last case. That's 1 year, $3.5 million plus incentives at the very end because everything else has gone to a hell in a handbasket. I think it says a couple of things. I think one, it says that there are some free agents that they think that they can get for significantly less. That will be part of the plan. And I think it also says that they feel like they can get to a tackle that can be at least most of what Orlando Brown was somewhere in the first or second round. There's somebody that they like, Orlando Brown Jr. What's his name? Davin Jones. Is that the bigger of the two? The second rated of the Ohio State tackles. 6'8", 374. The longest arms, the biggest hands. That's Orlando Brown coming out of Oklahoma. I mean, whether it's that guy or even guy, they I don't think they know who it is, but they know that they're going to get somebody and that they will coach him up, and that with Patrick Mahomes, as people have talked about, his ability to help limit the sacks, they're going to be fine. They don't have to overpay Orlando Brown.
Yeah, but even like Andre Dillard, right, is a Brett Veach all over him type, Mike Hughes, all those like bust. I'm trying to think of the other guy, the DeAndre Baker, like the busted first round pick is like Brett Veach's. That's his favorite song, right? So even somebody like that who obviously lost a job to Jordan
Isaiah
Mailata
Wynn, Juwan Taylor.
something like that, right? Like
Yeah.
that is something, athleticism at that offensive line position, inexpensiveness, like all that stuff. That's even if they want to go with free agency, they could do kind of or approach. Like I personally believe that their top picks are going to go at defensive end again, just because Patrick Mahomes is much more able to, and I know Sam said this on your show either last week or this week, but like Patrick Mahomes is much more able to cover up left tackle than he is like defensive end, and the problems there. So I actually think that they're going to kind of throw an aggregate solution at this.
And I guess I should say last line of defense is Joe Tooney at left tackle. That's what they did when a guy went down. We've had a couple of people comment about that. They do have a guy who played against a playoff team and did a pretty good job. I don't think it's plan A or B or C really, but there is a way to go. And when you've got a quarterback as good as Patrick Mahomes, you can make that work. Frank Clark, when we talked about this earlier today about, is he really done? Could he be back? The Chiefs hadn't sent out their goodbye tweet, with this picture of him holding the trophy and everything. Do you think, Jeff, that this actually is goodbye and that there's no chance of the Chiefs circling back and getting something done with Frank Clark?
It depends on what the market bears. And, I was talking to the Missouri Tiger Club today. And somebody asked me this question about players wanting to be around championship teams or having chances to win championships. And I said, for me, my experience in the NFL has always been that players care about three things: money first, quality of life second, winning third. And Frank Clark has 2 rings here. He's had a great run here. But if somebody throws a bunch of money at him, I guarantee you he's playing football someplace else in the fall as well. And this is a very down market for edge rushers. There's not a dominant player out there at that spot. He's obviously not a dominant player either, but Bud Dupree is probably the biggest name on the market at that spot. So it's very conceivable that teams that are really in need of pass rushers like Atlanta or someone along those lines would give him money. People who have salary cap space to burn. And that's the risk you take. Again, just with Orlando Brown Jr., there isn't really the need now to overpay for players who are okay. This team has gotten past that point, and you don't have to always have the best option at every position. Sometimes you have to develop players, especially when you're in the Chiefs, where the Chiefs are at now. You have to develop players. You have to be very smart with your money, because 1 or 2 bad moves can really set you behind in a lot of ways. And so I think we talked about Frank Clark not being on this team last year. And so he's probably gotten a lot farther than anybody thought he would get. He's done more this past season than anybody thought he would do. But again, I don't have a problem with them letting him walk and seeing what's out there, because if you're letting him get $20 million again is just a huge mistake.
Eric, like the deal for Frank Clark last year was basically they gave him what was going to be the same thing that was going to hit him for on the cap to cut him anyway. So it's basically he didn't play for free, right? But he got what it was going to cost him. If they were to do that again, it would be $9 million that he would be getting this time around. I don't know how much they can massage it. I'd have to take a closer look at it, but they clearly decided we're not going to give you that kind of money, or he thinks he can get more, which I think is erroneous. I think it was more of they've come as far as they can go with Frank Clark. I think any offer that was given to him was probably pretty minimal, and they're counting on their ability to find somebody and build them up. And I think Michael Dana played pretty well down the stretch. I mean, I think the guy maybe deserves a shot to get the starting nod there. At least until they find somebody who's a more traditional size shape combo. But he played pretty well down the stretch.
Yeah, and you're not. I mean, look, I hate to compare everything to the Patriots, but when's the last time the Patriots had a blue chip edge player, right? Like you're always picking late in the draft. You're always like Josh Uche is, and I know somebody asked about it, David Ajabo in the draft, but like Josh Uche is like the undersized Michigan edge player that like Belichick can do stuff with, like, and maybe the last like true elite edge player they had was Adalius Thomas in like 2007, right? Like you just can't get access to those players when you are who you are as a team. And so, yeah, Michael Dana, a guy who was kind of a weird like MAC player that got 1 year at Michigan, and now he's emerged as a really decent contributor. Carlos Dunlap was fairly effective for them last year, but to their maybe credit, not effective enough because he didn't play enough to get the big deal the next year. So maybe he can come back at a reduced rate, and try to win a championship again. Melvin Ingram similarly a couple of years ago. Like there are options for them, and they just drafted George Karlaftis to be at least one of the two defensive ends in the future. Like there's really no reason to chase Frank Clark. And there is a chance, and we talked about this on the last show, there's a chance that he comes back for a reduced rate if no one in the league believes that he's an elite level player. He could come back, but it's not. The Chiefs are much more in a, like, you think about it, again, I hate to compare the Patriots, but the Chiefs, when's the last time the Chiefs cut somebody or let somebody walk and then they came crawling back a couple years later? We saw this during the dynasty with at the end of the Belichick Brady era, where it was like Jamie Collins, gets cut and comes back. You see it. Who's the safety? Patrick Chung did that. Guys kind of getting, leaving. Kyle Van Noy did that. Guys leaving and coming back. That might be what the Chiefs do now. Is like, hey, yeah, go out and get your last decent sized contract. Come back and be a role player when you want to come win more Super Bowls.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Marcus Davenport's a name we haven't mentioned.
Davenport's going to have a market, dude. That's hard.
I'm just giving the list of names. Can I give the list of names? Is that all right? Bite my head off. Jadeveon Clowney is always out there, and now is edgy. Arden Key, Samson Ebikam. Trying to think. I'm scrolling through lists here. Yannick Ngakoue. There's a number of guys.
The biggest market.
Justin Houston. How about that name out there? So there are guys.
It is the ornery aspect to Kansas City.
Yeah.
Never rush the pass. He had like what 9.5 sacks this year. I mean, because I knew like he had a big bonus coming if he got to 10. He was a ball player. He's always been very good.
I mean, would it be time for him to double back and come back around? I never got the idea that he left here on good terms, right? That not like horrible terms, like take your crap and get the hell out, but just like he didn't seem happy to walk out the door.
I think things annoyed him here.
Yes, I would say yes. Individuals annoyed him here. I think we're probably hearing similar things. So listen, I think Frank Clark's time is over, but I will say this for the defensive line as a whole, when you throw in also Derek Nottie didn't play great football, but he at least was out there. Somebody's got to play. Throw in Colin Saunders as a free agent as well. If the Chiefs were to line up and play today, they need Tershawn Wharton to hurry up and get healthy from knee surgery to go next to Chris Jones. Those are their only two defensive tackles. I mean, we can talk about the edge, but at least there are guys, there is a Michael Dana to step in out there. But Josh Kando, it gets pretty thin pretty quick. I mean, there's going to have to be an investment along the defensive line as a whole for sure. Right, Jeff?
Oh, yeah, without question. Look, and these are, again, first world problems. I mean, if you're going to be a team that's been as successful as the Chiefs have been, you're going to face these decisions. And the guys who you just named, while they have been helpful and beneficial, they're not irreplaceable.
Right.
It's always tough when you're in this position to think about what's life going to be without this person or that person. They lost Tyreek Hill last year, and we all talked about how bad it was going to be, and it wasn't that bad. And so there aren't many players you're going to lose in this class, this crop, that I'm going to sit here and say, oh, they can't survive without them. I think they'll figure it out.
The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the best Chiefs podcast, as Eric Eager has dubbed us, is brought to you by the best when it comes to parking lots. Gana Asphalt and Concrete, serving the entire KC metro area, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at ganasphalt.com. Let's turn our attention to what this means for Chris Jones. You mentioned Tyreek Hill just a second ago, Jeff. Brett Veach said he left I don't know how much I buy this comment. I think it's a little bit of GM speak, but that he left the combine last year thinking they could get a deal done with Tyreek Hill. It didn't end up happening. He leaves the combine this year. Chris Jones is in the same situation. We've talked about it many times, but now it's on the table. They're making the cuts. They're creating the cap room. They don't have to do it, but it would help them even more if they want to get aggressive in free agency. Where do you think it sits right now with Chris Jones and the Chiefs? Brett Veach did say, yes, it would be better for us to get a deal done. He acknowledged that, and I thought that was a little bit of at least, not just stating the obvious, but saying, yeah, we're ready to make something happen.
I think it's an interesting situation with Chris. I think the decks are being cleared, as you said. I feel like I think it's not going to be an easy negotiation because, again, he is in a situation where this is going to be his last big contract, had probably his best year of his career in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. He knows what he means to this defense and what it would mean to have him not be a part of this. And there was a lot of people who thought, you really want to pay this guy $20 million a year, whatever it was 3 years ago. I guarantee you that number is going to be even more jaw-dropping this time around, given what T.J. Watt's been paid, what Aaron Donald's been paid, and he's going to want to top that. He's going to want to be the highest-paid defensive player in the game. I have no question about that. And while the Chiefs may feel like, yeah, we feel like we can get a deal done, it's different when the other side starts talking about what they want. And so I don't think we'll get to the point where he's going to be traded, but I do think it's going to be contentious, and I do think it's going to be a long, hard-fought negotiation with him.
Ooh, contentious. It wasn't contentious, as we said, up on the stage, although there may have been some libations involved in that when they were at the end of the parade talking to the crowd. He was the guy starting the run it back cheer, Eric. Where do you think it sits? What's the likelihood on Chris Jones getting done?
I think they'll probably do it. Get a contract extension done, but I do know they're aware of a few things, right? So, firstly, when you look at Chris Jones's career prior to this season, his career high for snaps played was at 854. That was 2018. Played 1,079 snaps. So he eclipsed his career high in snaps by 225, right? So he was on the field more this year. Was that because he was chasing the contract, or was that because, when you saw that the Chiefs defense, and this has been happening for a few years, but when you if you watch that Chiefs defense leave the huddle, Chris Jones is the last guy, right? In the announcement, he's the leader of that defense. Tyrann Mathieu had previously been, the guy, for Kansas City. You look at pressures. His career high prior to this season was 2018, also 79. This year he had 97. So he had 18 more pressures on the quarterback than he had previously.
Yeah, but that number just correlates to the same. It's almost the same.
I mean, his pressure rate was higher as well. And then you also look at sacks. He was involved in 17. That is more than he was involved in 18 per PFF. And he had 35 stops in the run game. That's 8 more than he's ever had again before. So you look at just like this season was an outlier in a lot of different ways. A lot of it was that he just played more. He carried more of it on his shoulders. He had always been a guy that didn't play every snap, and now he did. And so I think two questions come from that. One is he durable enough to continue to do that, right? Because I think that's a big part of being the highest paid defensive players. You got to be on the field all the time. And then the other question is was that production a product of being on your platform year? Because again, you're going to be buying Chris Jones at the very, very top of the market, and they are, we all know that Veach and his staff are not dummies. So those are the reasons I think that they might be, but all the rest of the league knows this too. So that would be the reason I think that they would be hesitant to sign him. But I ultimately think they do. But you're talking about a masterpiece of a season for Chris Jones, and it's really hard to move on from a guy after that happens.
A couple people in the chat room pointing out that there's an extra game, right? Something to keep in mind. Chris Jones did stay healthy, and they couldn't sit anybody down, so he was out there. I'm with you. If we really felt like the one move that they would make that was wrong, but they'd do it because they didn't have the alternative was Orlando Brown, right? That they give them that tag. They didn't do it. Does that give us? Should we all pause here and say? They'll settle all family business in one foul swoop. I was thinking of that scene at the end of The Godfather where, Michael Corleone says, today we settle all family business. And you see every one of his rivals being gunned down, whether on a massage table or coming through a spinning door? Like, is it like, listen, here's our prices, here's what we think you're worth, either take it or we'll send you out? Like, could they be that brazen to walk in the same year from Orlando Brown, Frank Clark, and Chris Jones?
That'd be a very Patriot thing to do.
Yeah.
I remember when Richard Seymour got sent packing to Oakland back in the day, and he wasn't a happy camper about it. And a lot of people were saying, how could you let go of a guy who's a future Hall of Famer? They did it. Yeah, did it with Lawyer Malloy. And it is, again, it's intriguing. It's interesting negotiation because of all the things Eric mentioned, the fact that he's going to be 30, that they just did it with Tyreek Hill. When you have a championship, you have cover for this kind of stuff. And you know that he's the kind of player that, are you really going to get, if he signs a 4-year deal, are you going to get 4 quality years out of him? I don't think that's happening. And so I think it's very hard to walk away from him right now. I agree with what Eric's saying. I think you have to look at it from a standpoint of what does that defense look like without him playing? And maybe you have to suck it up. But again, my sense is they're not chasing a dynasty in the way they were 3 years ago. I think they were a lot more full of themselves and a lot more the mindset, we're going to build a legacy and do all this stuff. I think now it's more of a year-by-year process. Let's be pragmatic. We know we're going to be in the running every year. What's the best thing for this team right now? And what's the best thing for this year, 4 or 5 years from now?
Yeah, I don't think they feel an urgency that it has to be right now, that we've got this little window and we've got to strike while they now have a confidence in themselves that they can extend that window out and they can make good decisions. And I want to point something out about the draft. Everybody loves last year's draft, and rightfully so. It was a tremendous draft. And this is what, we've talked about a lot, about getting extra draft picks. Let me run that draft back by you. And let's say the draft is Trent McDuffie, it's Brian Cook, it's Leo Chenal, it's Josh Williams, it's Darian Kennard, and it's Najee Johnson. That is a 7-pick draft, right? What made this draft work was that the fact that Darian Kennard couldn't even begin to get on the field didn't matter. The fact that Leo Chenal was largely a special teams player and only had a pocket of plays within the regular framework of the defense really didn't matter. It didn't bother people much. The fact that Najee Johnson was mostly just a kick cover on special teams didn't irritate anybody, because there was also George Karlaftis, Sky Moore, Jalen Watson, and Isaiah Pacheco. And it's the extra picks in those rounds. If you just go 1 through 7, that's not a bad draft. What I said was not, if it's Trent.
Yeah, and in an old Veach draft, take 3 more of those guys and throw them out, because though he was having 4 and 5 dude drafts.
And he would take, and what if there's no Josh Williams and there's no Jalen Watson and there's no Isaiah Pacheco, because they're packaged to move up in rounds to go get Sky Moore because he thought he might
previous
not
year
fall
or
to
something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If those are there. What I think to make all of this work, if you are going to walk on a Chris Jones, is you've got to keep stocking the draft board, because there are picks in last year's draft that are not home runs. And what makes it okay is all the extra picks. And that's where I think you consider it with Chris Jones. That's also what makes it acceptable to walk on Orlando Brown. He's going to get a big money deal somewhere else, and it's going to factor into their draft pick compensation, and they're going to get another third and probably more when if Colin Saunders signs and is a starter and signs for decent money, Derek Nottie signs anywhere, JuJu Smith-Schuster signs someplace else, they have the ability to maybe be walking on 4 or 5 starting players, which means for the 24 draft, there were times we look at that, the Patriot compensation was like 3 third-round picks and a 5th. You let 4 or 5 starters walk and they get decent contracts, they're going to get a pretty good haul of picks. The question is, do you need to supplement it more with Chris Jones? And can you get a team? How many more picks do you want this year? I don't know that you're enamored with this draft. You got to be pretty smooth about making sure you're starting to stock future cupboards to make these moves as well. Go ahead.
Well, not only that, but now that you're Veach and you have won 2 Super Bowls as an executive, you can start to do what the Howie Rosemans do, what the Eric DeCostas do, think about that. Like last year, the Eagles had 3 first-round picks, and they were like, well, we don't need 3 first-round picks, so we're going to take one next year and fleece the Saints for one of theirs. And so if you're Kansas City, and I know they're not going to do this with the first-round pick because they do want to pick in the first round of their own draft now, in the city. But like, you're thinking about what if you just don't like a player in round 3 and you're just like, okay, well, let's just move the pick and we're going to move and we're going to get next year's 2 or something like that from a team that's more desperate and wants more players. That used to be the Chiefs, right? When they traded back into the 2020 6th round for Bo Peep Keys, now you can sort of do it. And usually, and you look at the draft, I was with Cade Massey this week at Sloan. He and Richard Thaler wrote the paper about how teams will discount by a full round, like basically 25% more than they would. But that's because like most general managers are looking at future picks and saying that might be some other schmuck's pick that I'm trading away. Who gives a crap? But they're all Brett Veach's picks, right? Like Brett Veach is going to be this general manager for half a decade, no matter what happens. So he can start to sort of move back and like, and we wake up next April and we're like, well, how do the Chiefs have 13 picks? It's like, well, because they weren't desperate this year or last year, type of thing. That's also a big part of this. Like, I think you want to kind of get in that, this last year they had 12, they came out with 10. Part of that was because they traded up, or that was because they traded up for McDuffie and so forth. I like for that to be like 12 to 10 because they kept trading picks getting picks in the future. And I think 10's about the sweet spot as you can expect for a roster of their caliber.
I think the dumbest thing I ever hear is when they discount future picks, and all teams do it. Well, a pick next year is worth more than a pick 2 years from now. No, it's not. It absolutely is not. Unless you're Kreskin and you know that like the junior high kid class of 2028 is great and you can load up on that. Just keep stocking the picks and and the teams will overpay with future picks. And especially with Patrick Mahomes is going to be here in 3 years, right? You know that. So, and when you take the picks in the future, you end up waking up like the Eagles and Seahawks do this year and the Lions. I think don't all three of them have like picks that are like way higher than they ought to be? It's like, why the hell are these playoff teams picking up at 5? Oh, they took future draft picks because the Saints thought they were going to be good, because the Rams thought they were going to be good. And now the Lions have the Rams pick. And
the Denver Broncos,
yeah.
The Miami Dolphins thought they were going to be good when they traded. And then that pick ended up being Sean Payton. But like all of the models always assume like, whenever we, we're a vendor, we talk to teams. Everybody's like, well, didn't you know that we were supposed to be good? We weren't actually trading away. I'm like, no, but the Rams probably didn't think they were trading away the 5th pick or whatever. Detroit ended up getting 6th, I think, right? Like they coming off a Super Bowl, they probably felt like they were trading like a back end of the 20s pick, and that's just not always the case.
Yeah. By the way, are you going to plug the new Sumer Sports website?
Yeah, sumersports.com. By the way, when you're done listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold and 2D podcast, also the Sumer Sports Show with myself and Tom Smith-Schuster, you have 4 podcasts to listen to a week now. That is your homework for all of the great listeners to the Red, Gold, and Bold Show, as well as 20 hours of Soren Petro every week.
Sure.
8-10. You got a lot of content.
And NFL.com, all the columns of Jeff Chadiha. Let's plug everything. Plus, you can't I can't walk into any sports bar and not see Jeff staring at me.
That's right.
Usually it's the same backdrop.
That was like the whole running.
The suit.
Yeah, that's right. Every now and then I have to bust it out.
Take a picture of Jeff at the old PFF office on the TV and just, group chat. One of us.
Yeah. Listen, let's talk a little bit about the bad news. I guess it's bad news. I don't know. The Houston Texans were number 4 on the NFLPA survey, and the Chiefs were number 29. I'm not sure what this survey means, but I think that's something to put it into context. Chiefs were blown up, and in particular, the trainer. They went out of their way to put a footnote in there that the rest of the training staff, the players were okay with Jeff, but Rick Burkhalter really got bombed. I mean, if there was one thing that jumped out, the head trainer, and Rick Burkhalter's been with Andy Reid going back to the Philadelphia Eagles days, so I don't think Rick Burkhalter's going anywhere. Does this mean something? Should the Chiefs be taking this serious, or is it, luck of the draw and that's my championship ring tapping on the podium here when I address you?
Yeah, well, it's been a week since that thing came out, and I don't think anybody talks about it now. So that's how significant it was at the time. Look, it's an NFLPA sponsored survey. Clearly, the union's going to have an agenda. They want to improve quality of life for players around the league. That's why they do stuff like this. They couch it as they want free agents to know where they want to go and what players are getting into. But ultimately, it doesn't really mean a whole lot. The stuff they were complaining about seemed like again, first world problems. I always think about a lot of these guys come from programs that have amazing facilities and they're used to being coddled and all this stuff around them. So you take that with a grain of salt. The Burkholder stuff is interesting. And when I first saw it, my first reaction wasn't that this was more about the medical stuff. I think there's a lot of teams, locker rooms feel like there's spies around who go back and report to the front office about what's going on. It sounded something like that. Like they just didn't trust. A lot of stuff happens in training rooms. Players are in there for various reasons. They're talking about different things. And it just felt as if there was that vibe to it. Like he was just somebody who wasn't representing their best interests. Now you're talking about, and I say that because of the things that were said about if you get hurt, we don't feel like we can say stuff. We don't feel like there are ramifications if we report things. Like that kind of talk just kind of speaks to just trust. And so clearly they put this all on him. And so maybe they feel like he's just somebody who rats guys out. That was my take on it.
Eric, what did you take away from it?
Yeah, I mean, look, we have seen, and I don't actually know, like, were only Chiefs current players, able to comment on, Chiefs play, the Chiefs staff now, because we have had a situation where
just to be clear, not to cut you off, but the survey was taken between March of 22 and April of 22. So you're talking about mini camp time when there are guys that, may or may not be making the team. There's more than the 53 guys.
Yeah, but like,
just so people know when the survey was actually handed out.
But I'm asking like a question about like Justin Houston, like didn't have the best rehab from ACL, when he had to come back from ACL. Was he able to comment on the Chiefs, right? Like when I look at the team and I think about, from the outside looking in, I do see sometimes there's an issue. We talked about last year, like about development. They did a great job this year. I think they really committed to developing young players this year, and it really showed. But prior, like there were a lot of young players. Dorian O'Daniel, like literally was the same player he left, same player he came in. Kylan Saunders had mostly been the same player that he showed up as until this year, where he really has developed. And I think from an injury standpoint, you could poke holes at Eric Berry. You could poke holes at the Justin Houston situation. You could poke holes at some of those aspects. I'd have to look deeper. I think a lot of this also is just for content too. Like it literally looked like they created this thing so that they could publish it and kind of make some teams look bad, and maybe push teams to have better facilities. So that's interesting as well. Make no mistake, the Vikings, who were first in this, they got a new facility in a couple of years ago, right? And they moved from Eden Prairie to where they are now. So I think that there's also the newness aspect of it. And I can't remember who said this. I think it was on your show, Petro, but like a lot of these guys come from colleges where
Jeff just said it.
Yeah, they just have like money all over the place. Yeah.
Jeff,
I've heard this somewhere.
Where did I hear that?
I'm losing my mind, fellas. I'm losing my mind.
Yeah. No, and I think that is definitely part of it. I think how big a role does it play? I mean, not that much, right? I think all these guys, would you want a fancier? Like one of the things was like no chair at the locker. And listen, we've all been in the Chiefs locker. Well, at least Jeff and I have. And it's not fancy. I mean, it's time to have it upgraded. It's nicer up at the stadium, but the one they're in day after day after day for practice isn't the nicest. But you give a guy, listen, you want a fancy chair and luxurious locker room, or you want $250,000 extra per year? They're all going to take the $250K. Right, that's what's going to get it done. It's all said and done. JuJu Smith-Schuster still going at it with AJ Brown. What do you? I didn't even know that till you said it, Jeff, because I don't follow many players because I just don't think a lot of, like, for me, information comes out of it. I know you probably follow a lot more. It's something you've got to keep an eye on.
Well,
what do you make of the fact that he's still dancing on this when he's headed into free agency and ought to be trying to put the best foot forward to get the best deal he can?
I hope he doesn't wind up in Philadelphia. I think AJ Brown might try to knock him out the way AJ Brown's talking on Twitter. I mean, that's the level this beef has gotten to. I mean, just to sum it up, I mean, JuJu sounds like an idiot. It just let it go. I don't know what would prompt this level of just constantly poking people who you've already beaten. But at this stage, I understand AJ Brown's disdain for the whole thing, because at some point you want to move on with life. You want to let go. And if this, I think there's still this aspect of the NFL, but like 15, 20 years ago, yeah, I mean, there would be some repercussions for this. I mean, guys would be looking to put him to sleep if they had the opportunity. And so you don't want to, there's no reason for it. I mean, you have a ring, you had a good season, you have a chance to make good money, to spend this much time making fun of people you beat. And I thought the Eagles were very classy in defeat, by the way. So I think that just, to me, it just makes it all look bad.
Yes, and you've got the Kelsey brothers, who obviously make that even easier to, get along and I don't know, maybe bond or at least have some kind of relationship with your opponent there. What's amazing to me is what I actually think it does. Why it's of note is I think it hurts JuJu Smith-Schuster in free agency, because he looked like a guy who had knocked that crap off and was focusing on football. And then the moment he had success, the moment like, hey, we won a championship, I had some big catches in that, and now it's time to go be me, right? And I think there are teams that are going to be like, he ended up with a 1-year, $3 million deal with a lot of incentives that he hit almost all of, for a reason. And Eric, I think this torpedoes his value by mouthing off. Teams are like, well, what's next? How long until he's bitching about the team, right? If we don't win a championship, is a social media posts, are they going to be directed at the coach or his position coach, or is he going to be out on the logo starting crap and creating bulletin board material for oppositions like he was in Pittsburgh? It just makes you think that like any maturing that you thought had gone on, no, was just suppressed in the idea of trying to get paid, and I think he's misplaying his hand now.
Yeah, firstly, I'm going to start by just repeating what Jeff said, as I didn't hear it. But no, I'm just kidding. No, I mean the fact, like, let's call a spade a spade. JuJu's a clown, right? Like, this, like, he was dancing on the Bengals stadium. The Bengals were like 2-13, and like they kicked his ass in that game. And and he's really like the thing the Chiefs should be commended for. And I'll lump some other I'll lump some other people in this. Patrick's wife, Patrick's brother, like all this kind of stuff. They did a really good job of being like, hey, remember what the real mission is this year. And for the most part, people kind of, but I agree with you. I think like it hurts him because he exposed who he was and kind of who the Chiefs had to suppress in some ways a lot of the year. And if you're the Chiefs, or if you're any other team, you want to say, this guy's a 900-yard receiver with the best quarterback in football. He's kind of slow. He kind of is injury prone. Do we really want a high maintenance wide receiver who in some games is overshadowed by Marquez Valdez-Scantling? No.
Yeah. And I think, we had the question, will it hurt his chances of coming back with the Chiefs? Yes. Does it eliminate his chances? No. I think an Andy Reid call to the office, like, knock this crap off. The fact that it persists, as you said, Jeff, makes me think, though, that the Chiefs are not interested in pursuing it, that they've already moved on, or somebody would have called him in and said, hey, we're trying to get a deal done here. Stop being a jackass. And if no one's shutting him down, I don't think anybody from the Chiefs is in contact with him. Is that fair to assume?
I'd agree with that. I think he's feeling himself. I think he's reading the same free agent rankings that Orlando Brown Jr. has been reading, and he's seeing his name at the top of a really down wide receiver class and thinking, okay, as Eric said, I played nice and I stayed off social media for a few months, and now I get to go be me again. And we'll see what being me gets you when the market opens.
Yeah, you be you, boo. We'll see what the check is when it's all said and done. All right, make sure you hit those like, comments, the love buttons, the subscribe buttons. Doesn't cost you nothing, but it does us a lot of good. Make sure if you need anything when it comes to a parking lot, you call our friends at GAN Asphalt and Concrete. They do wonderful, wonderful work. I had a lot of people calling them, so we appreciate that. They are absolutely outstanding. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. And if you're looking for work, they are hiring all positions, starting pay up to as high as $30 per hour with paid time off and insurance insurance, among just some of the benefit packages, all positions, project manager, drivers, operators, all positions they're hiring at GAN Asphalt and Concrete. Go to ganasphalt.com. And if you're a fan of the 2D podcast, we're going to be running that back here in just a few minutes. You can catch that wherever you get your podcast. If you only listen to us on the Red, Gold, and Bold, check out the 2D podcast. It's our NFL version of the show, and we're going to do that. We're going to stream that live coming up next. So for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports and their brand new website, sumersports.com, and all their podcasts. Did we do a good enough job promoting, Eric? I hope so. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold.